Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver. And Tolliver, you would not know it from listening to this show, but discourse in this country is actually not so hot right now.
I think we need to change that. Like, let's make the show just like the internet. Just like wild comments nonstop.
No, that is definitely the wrong move. But it turns out people can be kind of mean to each other, even though one recent survey finds we actually agree on most things, even sensitive topics, but we're afraid to talk about it publicly. And it's not a surprise because, as we've seen, people can get ostracized or canceled, not to mention arrested and threatened with deportation for speaking out on certain issues. So this hour, we're asking if you are afraid to speak your mind right now. We've got an amazing panel with us as we take your calls at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, last week on the show, we asked if the reindustrialized America that President Trump wants is still possible. Here are some of the comments that came in on our voicemail after the show.
Hi, my name is Jude, calling from Florida. I believe that is a very critical national security interest to have an economy that is capable of manufacturing, not just from the companies like Apple or TMC or from their perspective, but what about education systems and infrastructure, and how do we build those kinds of supports around a manufacturing economy if that is in fact what we want to create?
This is Lisa Hecht calling from Boise, Idaho. With the defunding of a lot of universities, how will we be able to develop the technologies that will give U.S. manufacturing the edge?
My name's Jeff. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. The people don't want to work factory jobs. I have a sister who works a factory job, and she hates it. And I'm sure there's 1,000,001 people here who would rather get an education and go work like a trade or go work something more intellectual based.
Just become a DJ.
His sister just hates that job. Yeah, right. Well, you can subscribe to The Middle wherever you get your podcast to hear that entire episode. But now to our question this hour. Are you afraid to speak your mind right now? Tolliver, how can people who want to speak their mind reach us?
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. You can also comment on our live stream on YouTube if you dare. Okay, I'll get you on air. Leave a comment.
Joining us this hour, political activist and philosopher Dr. Cornel West. Cornel West, welcome to The Middle.
It's a blessing to be here, though, brother. I salute you, and I salute my dear brother, DJ Tolliver. That music is rich, the music is real, and it's one of the things that the country needs more than ever. We need something that's for real, that cuts deeper than all of the labels on the surface. It gets to our deep and rich humanity.
Oh, thank you, my brother. I'm putting that on my resume, man. Appreciate that.
Our other guest this hour is Kmele Foster, editor-at-large at Tangle News. Kmele, great to have you back on the show.
Jeremy, thanks so much for having me. Dr. West, it's a pleasure to be with you here, and it's always a pleasure to be back here, Jeremy, so thanks for having me again, and thanks to your entire team.
Thank you.
Brother, it's a blessing to be in dialogue with you. Very much so, very much so.
All right. So before we get to the phones, let me talk to each of you. Cornel West, you have spent a career in academia. I was talking to a political science professor recently who said he used to start his classes off by asking his students to talk about issues in the news, and he doesn't do that anymore because the students are too afraid to say anything controversial. Are you seeing that, or how would you describe the state of free speech in our country right now?
No, I think we're in deep trouble when it comes to people who want to dig deep in the corners of their own dark soul and speak the deep truths that they feel. It's more and more difficult to do that. It's hard to enter public space without feeling marginalized. We don't have the bonds of trust that's required for people to speak their minds so we can disagree with each other and still engage in respectful dialogue.
And why is that?
Well, I just think there's just spiritual decay. There's a moral decrepitude. It's when organized greed and weaponized hatred and institutionalized indifference run wild in a society, then you rest assured that you've no longer created context in which people feel that they can be fully themselves to raise their voices. So a lot of posing and posturing, echoes rather than voices. I come from a black folk whose anthem is lift every voice. It's not lift every echo. And I'm a jazz man. Yeah. Jazz man, you can't make it if all you got is an echo. You better get another job. You better find your voice. But it takes courage
Maybe
to
I'll
find your voice.
improvise.
You got to cut against the grain, and we don't have enough courage right now in the culture, and it cuts across color, class, region, religion, non-religion. It cuts across, cuts across all those lines because the empire itself is experiencing this deep spiritual decay.
Camille Foster, what do you think about the state of free speech in our country right now?
Well, I'm certainly deeply concerned about that. I think there's agreement on the panel with that, with respect to that. I've been involved in a lot of these conversations for many years now. I'm on the board of FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which used to be Individual Rights and Education. And most of the issues FIRE used to contend with were on campus, but we saw this just growing problem with respect to the need to defend free expression in a bunch of other contexts and broadened our mandate accordingly. It's interesting that back in 2020, 2021, 2022, when we were having these conversations, much of it focused on cancel culture. A lot of it was about concern with respect to conduct on the political left. Obviously, the left kind of controlled the culture in many respects. They had the White House, if not Congress. And things have changed pretty substantially in recent years. Conservatives used to be very concerned about cancel culture. A lot of that concern seems to have abated somewhat. And President Trump has been engaged in a great deal of explicit censorship, in other cases, actual active harassment of various media organizations through the courts, et cetera. So we've gone from simply, and not simply because it was consequential and important then as well, but a kind of culture that had this disposition towards cancellations that were often happening in these social contexts that had pretty real consequences for people in their jobs and in their personal lives, and that polling seemed to suggest was contributing to them not sharing their perspectives as often. And it was a majority of people, irrespective of their kind of background in most contexts. And that trend has continued. Unfortunately, not only has it continued, we see the government become a more active participant in a lot of these cancellations. So we both have a real political problem that we have to navigate and contend with, but we also still have a lot of really unhealthy social dynamics that are at play. And I would actually agree with Dr. West in an important respect. I think technology has contributed to a real kind of decaying of the sort of culture around free expression and pluralism.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into the issue of social media and all of the harm that it does to people just being able to throw bombs anonymously, basically, in the public square. But Dr. West, what are the downsides if people are afraid to speak out?
Well, you just end up with a nihilism because people feel as if what they say does not matter. And of course, that's a short move to whether they themselves ever matter. If your voice doesn't matter, then you wonder whether you matter at all, right? I mean, the Black National Anthem had to do with the people who were viewed by so many in society as not counting, not mattering. So when you say lift every voice, oh Lord, I really matter. Yes, it is. And your voice, when raised, can actually shape your destiny, beginning with the memory of your grandmama, beginning with how you treat your child, beginning with shaping the future of the country. So that it's a spiritual decay. And I keep coming back to spiritual because, see, once you live in a society in which money and power are the fundamental determinants of your humanity, then lifting voices and free speech are tertiary. They're secondary. It's the moneyed folk. It's the powerful folk. It's the wealthy ones. And we've got to fight back. I mean, I'm not one into bleakness and gloom and bloom. I believe in fighting back. I go down swinging, lifting my voice, along voices of others. And I want to hear all the other voices, even the voices I disagree with. I want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, let's actually, the lines are full, so let me just get to one call quick before we go to a break here. Angie in South Dakota is joining us. Angie, welcome to the middle. Go ahead. Are you afraid to speak your mind?
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yes, I'm an educator. I'm in the school system, and it's a public school system. And I work in the arts. And so I've got teenagers on the stage with me every evening, and I have very close and personal relationships with all their parents because they're involved. And it's gotten worse and worse over the years. But I come back around to trying to teach them lessons of, expression through kindness. We have issues between parents and trans students that's come to a head over the years. And I come back to the fact that every one of these students are fighting a battle every single day with mental illness, every one of us in the stage, and that they're all hurting in their teen years, they're struggling, and that don't we all want these kids to feel loved? And I'm finding that that's something that we can find commonality on. But if I were to go any further, I mean, that would be my job. That would be my job. So, and
you would be fired if you were to go any further?
I would absolutely. If I were to say anything more about, hey, I know you don't want to use their pronouns, but they have rights, right? That would be the end for me. So instead I'd say, okay, we can't call them by the pronoun. I don't even say pronouns. I just say, can we call them by their name? And that works out for everybody. So we are kind of mediating these through a safer, more shallow way of handling all these issues that are really political for their families.
Yeah. Well, Angie, thank you so much. So great to hear from an educator in a public school system in South Dakota. As we kick this off, a reminder, our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. And Tolliver, we said that speaking your mind has become difficult on college campuses. A number of foreign students were detained after protesting or even writing criticism about Israel's war in Gaza.
Yeah, one was a Tufts University student who wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper criticizing her school's response to the war, and whose arrest by ICE went viral. Here's Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal grilling Secretary of State Marco Rubio about that.
Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat.
Someone is a threat. We should note that the student, Rumeza Ozturk, was ultimately freed from immigration detention. So that story continues, though, and with a number of other people. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Above the Law with the song Freedom of Speech. So these guys were on Ruthless Records with NWA, and NWA famously was really scared to speak their minds. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking if you're afraid to speak your mind right now. Tolliver, how can people reach us?
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on every single piece of social media.
I'm joined by political activist and philosopher Cornel West and Camille Foster, editor-at-large at Tangle News. And before we get to more phone calls, you mentioned money and power, Cornel West. If we think about traditional media companies in this country, CBS, ABC, Washington Post, etc., they've all been targeted by the Trump administration, maybe with costly lawsuits. Do you think that they are self-censoring right now to avoid the ire of President Trump?
Oh, I think so, my brother. Very much so. Not only that, many of them are capitulating and allowing their trajectory to be determined by what his own values and what his own ends and aims ought to be. And of course we see this with the universities. Look at Columbia University capitulates. We get so many others capitulate. Harvard's about to capitulate, $500 million. You have to have courage. You have to be willing to straighten your back up, speak your mind, and go against the grain, as it were. I think that's so important.
And Camille Foster, what about that and social media, which you brought up? It's so easy on social media to pile on, accuse people of things anonymously, and make people not want to say what they think.
Sure. I mean, those are new social dynamics that have emerged, and not so new anymore, but now well established, where we can very quickly assemble online, both to collaborate and work towards some outcome that could be a positive outcome. It could also be bullying, a kind of online censorship mobs that are looking to get people fired from their jobs. But I do think there's an important parallel to draw between what we're seeing now happening and what was happening during, say, COVID, when we did see a kind of soft censorship where various political officials were perhaps coordinating with various independent private actors, social media companies, tech companies, in order to ensure that certain kinds of messages weren't getting out. And it's certainly arguable that they had some legitimate interest in attempting to do that because of public health concerns. But I do think that there is a non-trivial kind of relationship between what we saw there and what we've seen in the present day, where we're seeing more and more instances of this, and we're seeing the current White House kind of use its own efforts to try and achieve some of the same ends. In certain instances, it's filing these rather frivolous lawsuits and scoring these settlements. In other cases, it's a different kind of quiet coordination, like with universities, where they've gone in and tried to obtain these concessions that allow them to essentially dictate the terms on campus. And I worry a lot about the pendulum swinging from left to right, as opposed to us trying to pursue a more sustainable, kind of pluralism first, centrist kind of perspective on these issues. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the prior bad acts helped contribute to the current circumstance, which is deeply unhealthy. And I'm not certain that we're actually taking the right lessons on board in order to build a more viable future for ourselves.
We have another Kmele who's on the phone from Sun Valley, Idaho. Kmele, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi, thanks for having me. I was born in the late 60s and raised to always voice my opinion. And I cannot remember a time until recently, since Trump took office, that I have felt in public situations, not so much private, but definitely public situations, where I was actually hesitant about calling specifically a man out for doing something I thought was disrespectful or stating something disrespectful. And it's a very scary feeling. It's a very odd feeling.
What was the reason that you were worried to say what you thought about that?
I mean, I actually felt, which I've never felt in my life before, I actually felt in certain public situations in the last 2 or 3 years, physically, a little bit of afraid to call this person out, whether it was, a sexist remark or, just almost aggressive behavior, which I've never really experienced in a public setting before. And again, Idaho, it's a very red state, but I live in a very blue county, and so certainly I'm aware of different perspectives, and I appreciate everyone's perspective. But when someone crosses that line, I feel lately that I'm actually a little bit physically afraid to call someone out. And that scares me because I have a 22-year-old daughter who I've really raised to express her opinions. It's very uncomfortable. It's very sad,
well, Kmele, thank you very much for that. Cornel West, what do you make of that? Just the fear to say what you want to say, even for fear that you're going to be physically harmed potentially.
No, I think that what she says is a confirmation of what I'm trying to put forward and what Brother Kmele is trying to put forward. I think that the crucial thing at this point is to try to highlight what needs to be in place for us to not just fight back, but to change and transform the decay and the decadence that are presented to us. You see, that one of the crucial things is that any democracy that will flower and flourish needs to be rich in the things that money cannot buy. Love, trust, integrity, honesty, decency, kindness, sweetness. Otis Redding tells me to try a little tenderness. You see, those are the things that every human being needs. And you get it in the music. You used to get it in the churches and mosques and synagogues, but they've been commodified. They've been so deeply ideologically polarized that it's hard for them to get at their prophetic sources that talk about the things that money cannot buy. And I was blessed to grow up in a family, with the West Family, Shiloh Baptist Church, Black Panther Party taught me to be in solidarity with the poor, even if you get shot by the police or the FBI or anybody else, because that is a wealth that the world can't take away. Even if you broke the Ten Commandments financially, you're still rich, very rich, and that's true for the jazz women and the blues men. They got something that money can't buy, but most of them broke as can be. But oh, they got some riches that the world is hungry for then and now.
Yeah. Let's get to Ben in West Hartford, Connecticut. Ben, go ahead with your thoughts.
Hi. So we were talking a little bit earlier on in the show about sort of the college environment and all that stuff that's going on there with free speech. And I think for me, one of the things, I'm in college right now, and one of the things that makes me a little bit afraid to speak out, sort of as someone who's trying to make friends, make connections at this time in my life, I don't want to sort of share my views before I've gotten to know someone well, because I feel like if I state my claim, especially my views trend towards the left, and sometimes that can be farther than other people's views go. I feel like if I share those views, I'm going to lose that person, and maybe I'm going to lose the people around them if that sort of the word gets out, sort of thing like that. So,
do you worry about losing like career prospects if you say what you think about something?
Honestly, I had not thought about that, but now that you mention that, I think that is a good point. I think part of this time in life is not only building social connections, but building job connections as well. And I think something that I might think is an offhand comment about a headline in the news or something like that, I worry that could paint an image of me for someone who has opposing views, and they would be inclined to cut me off or try to otherwise prevent me from succeeding.
Yeah. Let me just ask you one more thing, Ben. Do you think this is something temporary, or do you think that things will change and eventually you'll be able to say what you really think?
I honestly don't know. I think that for me, as I've sort of gone through the school system, elementary, middle school, high school, now college, I think it's gotten more difficult to speak my mind as sort of I've gained opinions and learned more about the world. But I don't know if that is simply how it is as you get older, or if that's something more recently. When I was in elementary school, that was the first term of President Trump in 2016. So that sort of is a bit of a turning point in my mind for me in terms of how speech is treated, how I treat speech.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Ben. Really appreciate it. Always love hearing from a college student. Camille Foster, wow. What do you think about that, hearing from Ben, who's in college and was in elementary school when President Trump was in office and feels that way?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Again, it's just the trend line with respect to opinions on this, the nature of the debate and how it's evolved over time. And what I'm hearing here with the callers, and again, this is me kind of projecting something onto them. I don't have data to support it, but I do wonder if a number of people on the left who had traditionally felt a bit more empowered to speak their mind in prior epochs have since the election perhaps begun to feel some of the concern and trepidation that some people on the right have been talking about, people who were perhaps out of step with some of the kind of social justice issues. I think the first caller we had mentioned some of the gender and pronoun debates. And around that time, one of the dynamics that I observed was the fact that there was this kind of equivalence drawn between speech and violence. And even she kind of talked about this concern about safety with respect to actually being able to speak to various issues. And I find it really interesting. And it also makes me think, well, shouldn't we be talking a bit more about solutions? How do we actually work through a circumstance like this where so many people on so many sides of our various political circumstances find themselves in the situation where they feel that they can't express themselves openly and honestly. There have always been things you can't say without some sort of sanction. But it's also the case that the universe of things that you can't say, it seems, has expanded in a pretty considerable way. And that is a cause for concern.
Well, here on the middle, we are very proud that we also always hear from people who are Trump supporters, who are people who are independent. So if you're out there and you're on the conservative side of things, I'd love to hear from you at 844-464-3353 about whether you feel like you can speak your mind right now. Tolliver, what is coming in online?
It's like there's so many comments. Appreciate them. Keep them coming. Briefly, Randy in Rochester broke the record for swears. Okay. In a message, I want to acknowledge Randy for that. Shout out to Rochester.
Congratulations.
Yes. But Mikey in Gainesville says, from North Central Florida, as the name of the show, the citizens who registered to vote are now afraid to say which party they are part of, afraid of personal retaliation, and now they can't vote in primaries because they register as non-party affiliated. Kareen says, guns. You don't know who has one, so you don't speak up. Duncan in North Carolina says, it's interesting that we all watched China crush free speech in Hong Kong recently. Now Trump regime is imitating the CPC. So a lot of interesting comments coming in. I was trying to formulate a question with this, but I know that my self-image of America growing up was that we are the free ones and that other countries that this kind of thing happens. Do you think that, I guess, Brother West, do you think that our image of ourselves is fundamentally changed going forward because of the era we're in now?
No, I think they are. I think they are. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that in the history of the human species, truth seekers and truth tellers and truth enactors have usually either been crucified, forced to drink hemlock, marginalized, forced to go in exile. Think of Socrates. Now, I'm a Christian, so I got a bias toward Jesus, but oh, Lord, have mercy. 33 years old on the cross. Mm, mm, mm. And we haven't even got, the Martin King, and we haven't got the Rabbi Heschel, we haven't got Dorothy Day. These are folk who were thoroughly marginalized, vilified, attacked, because they were just trying to talk about love and justice and kindness and sweetness. So we have to keep in mind that there's never been a golden age. That doesn't mean there hasn't been a better age. Things have been better than they are now. There's no doubt about that. But there's never been a golden age, so that I hope none of us in any way are paralyzed by despair. That's the crucial thing. We have to be fortified to bear witness to love, integrity, honesty, decency, a certain kind of commitment to something bigger than greed and bigger than hatred.
Let's get another call in. Robert is calling from Cincinnati, Ohio. Hi, Robert. What do you think? Are you afraid to speak your mind?
Hello. I want to, for me personally, no, I am not. Well, it just depends on the environment. I tend to, being gay, I just have naturally, found myself sometimes forgetting that straight people exist. And then I'm reminded, and then I have to, just, code switch. But I want to talk about the online phenomenon of, so when I was growing up, I'm 28, there was a big thing of, you have to watch what you on the internet. You can't be posting, things about from your party. You have to make sure that, if a future employer looks you up, you will be square and, presentable. And now there's an interesting, I don't want to say it's an inverse or a parallel, but it's there's phenomenons of the QAnon conspiracy and then echo chambers and forums on Reddit and 4chan and weird, I think the internet has helped make people feel less alone, but at the same time you can curate, and then the algorithm curates for you a chamber in which you do not interrogate yourself. You are affirmed in everything that you hold and think of. And sometimes that can lead to people increasingly spiraling out of reality. And I think then they bring that to the real world. And it's another variable, another aspect that is, I think, to talk about in this whole conversation.
Yeah. Robert, thank you very much for that. Kmele Foster, is there a difference, do you think, with the social, just briefly, is there a difference with social media's effect on people on the right and the left, do you think?
I'm not so sure about that. I think that in both instances, it can contribute to these kind of mobbings. It can contribute to this process of dehumanization. We're speaking to one another through these avatars. We don't even imagine that this is kind of another person on the other side. It's just they're irredeemable and terrible and bad. And I actually think something Dr. West said a moment ago, just there is an important connection between people being able to speak freely and have this process of truth discovery take place. And we really need to be able to speak freely in order to arrive at what is true in the
Right.
world.
Converse and get to the truth. Tolliver, there have been moments in the past when people, you heard that there's not been a golden age. There have been moments in the past when people got in trouble for saying what they thought.
Yeah, back in 2001, comedian Bill Maher made some controversial remarks about the 9/11 hijackers on his show Politically Incorrect, which aired on ABC. He said the terrorists weren't cowards. Here's what former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer had to say in response.
It's a terrible thing to say, and it's unfortunate, and that's why there was an earlier question about has the president said anything to people in his own party. They're reminders to all Americans that they need to watch what they say, watch what they do, and this is not a time for remarks like that. There never is.
Just for people who aren't watching on YouTube, Camille Foster just shook his head. By the way, Bill Maher's show was canceled by ABC, but he was back on the air on HBO shortly after that in 2003 with Real Time, which has been on the air ever since. Tolliver, what have you got for us here?
This is the Stable Singers with Long Road to DC. It's off their album Soul Folk in Action, which is their first foray into politics. And I just want to say, I know Mayor Muriel Bowser in DC is blasting this one right now. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. In this hour, we're asking if you're afraid to speak your mind right now. You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. I am joined by Camille Foster, editor-at-large at Tangle News, and political activist and philosopher Cornel West. And before we go back to the phones, since this show is live, I get to ask about something that's happening right now, which is how does the deployment of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. affect what we're talking about here? D.C. is home to some of the biggest protests. Will people, Dr. West, be scared away from speaking their minds with all the National Guardsmen? And it happened in L.A. before, now Washington.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Trump's project in many ways is cruelty based on fear. There's no love, no tenderness, no sweetness there. This is domination and manipulation. So it's the brothers and sisters of all colors there in Washington who will fear the brunt, terrorist consequences psychically, spiritually. We'll see what happens on the ground. But then all of the various protests that we often go to Washington, D.C., how many will want to do that with this kind of militarization that we see at work? So that, but we shouldn't be surprised. I say the thing about Trump is he's a very honest gangster. He hasn't tried to hide and conceal any of his cruelty at all. He's been very explicit about it. When he came out in the 1980s and said, I want people to hate. That's what he said about the brothers in Central Park. He said, people talking about love, no, I want them to hate. You said, well, no, Trump, we don't agree with that, brother. Now, that doesn't mean we have to just hate you back. That's too petty a game. We love the very people you hate. We don't want you crushing the people we love, so we organize and we try to speak the truth. But this is a very, very ominous move, but it's not a surprising one coming out of the Trump White House.
Camille, what do you think about the sort of effect of this law enforcement presence, National Guard presence on speech?
I mean, interestingly, the stepped-up efforts with ICE in various blue cities had actually contributed to an outpouring of support for protesters and demonstrators. And I suspect that this provocation is actually going to yield precisely that same sort of blowback and might actually inspire a lot of people to speak out, because it does feel like such a kind of naked affront of certain things and values that people had espoused. And there is, I think, a perception on the left that with respect to this troop deployment, that this is unacceptable, that this is beyond the pale, and that the narrative that the Trump administration has tried to spin about DC being in this kind of utter state of complete disarray is one that just doesn't really seem to fit the facts from their standpoint. So I think they really are kind of two separate issues in terms of the conversation we've been having about kind of this fear of expressing yourself in different contexts and the particular overreach in yet another area by the Trump administration here.
Let's go to Matthew, who's in Las Vegas, Nevada. Hi, Matthew. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Thank you. First, allow me to say that let me say the bias and say that along with Kmele and Cornel, and excuse me for the familiarity, but I'm African American and academically pretty well trained. I say that not for any purpose other than to acknowledge that I have to agree with Dr. West, especially when it comes to our senses of what's going on politically. This isn't a left or right issue. What's going on here actually has to do with capitalism and the need for those plutocrats who are quickly becoming our techno bros and other people hiding from the fact that the American dollar is about to sink to the bottom of the well. I think what's happening here is that's all the Trump behavior is all disguised to keep the American people from understanding really what's going on, which is a greater loss of their faux democracy. What we don't understand and what's going on here at its very depths is that the American people are actually being sullied into believing that we're talking left and right and Democrat and Republican, but we're really talking about capital and its ability to maintain its position once the society sinks to where it has to be, given where China, the BRICS, and the ASEAN nations are going.
Interesting. Matthew, thank you very much for that. Cornel West, your thoughts?
No, I agree with what he's saying. I just want to put a spiritual and moral dimension to it, because capitalism is a system based on predatory greed, looking for short-term gain. But it can be corrected, it can be reformed, it can be transformed so that some of the innovation that goes with capitalism can actually be used to produce a whole host of innovations where poor and working people have access. We're at a moment now in the history of capitalism in the United States where the greed has become so overwhelming and the levels of poverty and homelessness and rootlessness is increasing. So you get to grotesque wealth inequality, and so you end up with that dynamic being hidden because Trump is using so many distractions. And he's got different distractions every week. He's got 4 or 5 of them every week. So that people don't see what's really going on in terms of the shaping of the impact of the economy on their lives.
Alex is calling from Houston, Texas. Alex, are you afraid to speak your mind right now?
Actually, I would have to disagree with Professor West. I'm not afraid to speak my mind. And I think what happens is that the left, mostly the left, and sometimes the right, have been very selective on what you should say publicly and what you should not say. For instance, social media is governed by mostly people who would identify as leftists, and they're the ones that are censoring conservatives. And throughout history, people who have been right about issues have been silenced. But nowadays, I don't feel like Trump's offensive. I don't feel like Trump is, I don't know what you want to call him. I don't think he's a guy that's out there to get people or to get the left. I just think that people like me who are informed, who are aware of what's going on, I've heard Professor West on many media outlets speak his point, his mind, and I respect his opinion. But, I think that's the beauty of America. I could disagree with his opinion and not be afraid to speak my mind. If I'm against gay marriage, I should, as a conservative, be able to speak that on the public forum without being attacked or targeted by the left. And, coming from my point of view as a conservative, I'm Hispanic, and I agree with a lot of what Trump is doing, and I'm glad that finally someone's actually taking action against a lot of stuff that the left has throughout the years. For the last 20 years since I've been in high school, all the propaganda that they've put and pushed on the young people nowadays, I think people are waking up. I think people are awake. We are not woke. We are awake already, and we are the true people who are informed. There was an interesting article back in 2009, I believe, or 2010, that Tide put, and he said the people who voted for Obama and the people who supported Obama were the uninformed voter. I'm not an uninformed voter. I'm very informed. I'm very aware. I'm aware of the environment and the area I'm in, and I'm not afraid to speak my mind. If people find it offensive, then you know what? Yeah. You are against free speech. because even if there's a white racist or a black racist or a Hispanic racist,
right.
they should speak their mind. They have that right as long as they're not violent, as long as they're
Okay, Alex, we've got it.
anybody.
We've got it. I appreciate your call and thank you for listening and for calling in. And let me go to Kmele Foster. You got your conservative right there, but he's still talking about the censorship that what Trump was talking about in the campaign with social media. How does that look now? I mean, what do you think about what you just heard there?
I mean, look, I do think that some of those prior incidences and circumstances, the kind of evolving culture with respect to who has power and control and who's doing the kind of active formal censoring and even the informal censoring in certain instances. But one of the things that I think is really important, and what the caller actually highlights, is the importance of not getting into the habit of focusing too narrowly on imagined motives for people who are doing things that we find unacceptable. And I think a lot of the kind of call-out culture, as it was referred to before, again, cancel culture, call-out culture, there's this emphasis on these categorical denunciations. Well, what you said is sexist. And the project of actually having a substantive argument about some particular issue, for example, the pronouns conversation, it is entirely possible for someone to feel uncomfortable with the expectation that I will use someone's preferred pronouns without themselves being transphobic. That is entirely possible. And I know that that is actually hard for some people to square, but there are kind of competing issues that do, in fact, have to be disentangled. And agree or disagree with that caller, I think that that caller does kind of illustrate the fact that someone can arrive at very different perspectives about the same issues. And the important thing for us to be able to do is have a conversation about it.
Jeremy, can I jump in real quick?
It's interesting. He pointed. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I feel like I have to draw a distinction because people talk about, when the left was, in power, the woke situation. But I think, like, if you misgender somebody, you don't get detained. You know what I'm saying? I think comparing these, like, correct, that era to the current era is unfortunate and incorrect, right? So that's
I think.
Well, and I also think
succinctly.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Well, succinctly, I'd say that in general, most of the concern that's been expressed is not about getting detained.
Yeah. Yes. Although for some people, I guess it is right now. But Dr. West, one of the things that our caller just did there was he pointed out that he's Hispanic. And that he believes this even though he's Hispanic. And it gets to what Kmele was just saying, that people make all these assumptions about you. That may make you afraid to say what you think. Can you be an African American in this country and say, I disagree with this part of, the culture that I'm supposed to? I mean, remember when Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. What do you think about that, sort of assigning all these motives and all these things to people when they have one view or another?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised the question. I mean, I was glad that the conservative brother Alex is not afraid to speak his mind. I think that's a beautiful thing. I lift your voice. I take that very seriously. I will fight for his right to be wrong. I just want to make sure that we have a respectful disagreement. Now, there's a text out, Truth Matters by Robert George and a brother named Cornel West, dealing with what? Fruitful disagreement in an age of division, right? And we've been running around the country doing that. He's conservative, a vanilla Catholic brother, and I'm chocolate and, kind of hang loose Baptist and trying to be a force for good before the worms get my body and I go on to the next stage. But the crucial thing is this, though, that there's no such thing as any determinism. You see, the quality of an argument and the depth of your insight is not determined by whether you Latino or black or African or indigenous person or Muslim or Christian or what have you. Truth is something bigger than all of that. Justice is something bigger than all of that. And as Brother Tolliver reminds us with his music, beauty is something bigger than all of that.
Yep.
And if we lose that motivation and aspiration, then it's all over. I mean, we were talking about the beauty of Brother Kmele's name that he gets from his magnificent, precious, loving mother. But that's not just because he's a black brother. No, the love is love. And the beauty is beauty. I mean, you can't deny that.
Yeah, what a great point. Devin is calling in from Chicago, Illinois. Devin, welcome to The Middle. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I've just been listening to you guys talk a lot about the division in our country, specifically with regard to the way people are choosing to speak or feel afraid to speak. And I think a big part of that is that most of us forget that we're in the gray. I think because of the media and a lot of these hot button issues on both sides, whether it be everybody from the left is Antifa if you're on the right, and everybody on the left thinks everybody from the right's a Proud Boy. And, I kind of disagree with that assessment of kind of each side of the political sphere, just because I run into people that fall right or fall left, and I look for commonalities. And, Dr. Cornel was just mentioning, love and music, and even something as simple as sports that we can find common interest in. And I think, unfortunately, we're being pitted against each other by the politicians and the media, maybe not consciously by the media, but it reminds me of Jon Stewart in a sense, where I love The Daily Show, but I made the connection where I felt like it was the spoonful of sugar that was helping the medicine go down. And unfortunately, I feel like the liberals are taking a lot of these very serious issues that are going on and only choosing to look at it as something to laugh at, something to joke about, something to make fun of Trump at. The South Park episode was very big. The White House is responding to that. And we're getting caught up in all these small things that really don't represent the larger whole of our communities. And I think that it's making people more divisive than feeling connected. And I'm trying to figure out a way that we can get back to that connection with each other.
Devin, when people say to me, "Oh, there is no middle anymore," I'm just going to play them your call. I think that's all we have to do there. So thank you very much for calling in. I really appreciate it, Kmele. We've just got a couple minutes left here, but let me ask each of you, what do we do now to try to get to a point where free speech and open conversation doesn't carry so much potential risk in this country? Kmele Foster, I'll start with you.
I think Dr. West has kind of been saying it all along here. We have to cultivate a greater sense of empathy. We have to cultivate a deeper commitment to actually understanding one another's points of view, to not engaging in these kind of blanket condemnations of the other and imagining that there's nothing we have in common with people who disagree with us politically. And with respect to things political, it would be great if we began to take some steps and perhaps not make every single aspect of our lives heavily politicized. It's fine for things not to be decided in government. It is fine for us to try to have public schools that prioritize teaching you to think critically and engage in the Socratic method, as opposed to have arguments about whether or not we're going to enforce a kind of CRT-oriented curriculum or ban CRT completely. It seems to me that that's the wrong conversation to have. Can you build children with sound minds through our educational system who can engage with one another in a productive way in society? That's the ultimate question, and I don't think that our political valences necessarily have any formal impact on how we go about trying to achieve that.
Cornel West, last word to you. Your thoughts. How do we go forward?
No, the brother, he said that with eloquence. Cicero and Quintilian said eloquence is wisdom speaking. Now, politically, ideologically, it could go in a lot of different directions, but you have to have some kind of spiritual and moral starting point where you feel that you want to treat other people as human beings, not as simply means to manipulate and ends to subjugate. And once you lose that, then no matter what your politics are, you're just into domination, manipulation, and transaction. And Trump we know he's in a domination, manipulation, transaction, but he is a sign and symptom of a culture that is obsessed with transaction, manipulation, and is very much market driven. And I go right back to the point again, we've got to reach a point where non-market values like love and trust and fidelity make a role. So if I want to say, for example, genocide is taking place in Gaza, but people who are critical of me have a right to be critical. Absolutely. Let's have a conversation. Absolutely. But that's not a brand. That's a cause. That's different. We're moving away from the market. We're talking about something deep, humanity.
And that's the word we'll end on, humanity. Let me thank my guests, Cornel West and Kmele Foster. So great to have you both on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Jeremy. We appreciate you, man. You and Tolliver.
Thank you.
Both of y'all.
And Tolliver. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. We've got extra episodes every week, only available on the Middle Podcast feed.
As always, you can call in at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com, where you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter and support us with a tax-deductible contribution.
The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmis-Dawes, John Barth, Annika Deschler, and Brandon Kondritz. Our technical director is Steve Mork. Thanks to our satellite radio listeners, our podcast audience, and the hundreds of public radio stations that are making it possible for people across the country to listen to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and I'll talk to you next week.